Shalom, привет, salut tout le monde, and welcome. Alright, so I've been meaning to do this video for actually quite a long time, maybe close to a year actually. I actually promised a friend that I would do it, and so I'm gonna do this video, and then I'm gonna try to upload in the next couple days. We're gonna start doing some question and answers. You guys have asked a lot of questions, and like I said in the last video, that I can't really respond to you guys on YouTube or whatever. So I'm just gonna start doing my responses in video form, because a lot of it's a waste of time if I comment directly, because a lot of my comments just get banned. So I'll sit there like an idiot typing a long message or whatever, and it just gets banned. Like I'm not sure if I'm crazy, but I think something's wrong with my comment sections. And then the one video, the never ending world, like the end of days video, I think the first part, you'll notice the comment section is off. I didn't turn it off. I don't do that. You notice none of my videos have the comments off. That one video, the comments are off. YouTube did that, not me. Okay, so YouTube actually does censor my comment section. All right, so we're going to talk about marriage and divorce. And this is really just, I don't want to, dox anybody or give too much information out. But I met a guy years ago. Actually, we have a direct marker of actually when we met. He's actually a former Marine. He served in the Marines for a while. There's actually two Marines. There's a couple soldiers and at least two Marines that I have in the group chats. And I'm really grateful for these two guys. Well, I'm really grateful for a lot of you guys. But I'm just talking about these two Marines in particular. And they both really helped me through some really bad times, and this kind of comes back to suffering. It comes back down to what we talked about in the last video, in the curses of Moses. And these two guys have suffered quite a lot in life. And one of them, served in Afghanistan, full out PTSD. This guy can tell you some crazy stories. And because of what he went through in Afghanistan, he's able to communicate to me in ways other people can't. Okay? He could feel things that I'm feeling that other people can't, right? Likewise with the my friend who I'm really making this video for, and I hope you guys can gain something from this as well. When we first met, and we're talking, learning about each other, I met him randomly on Telegram. I was living in Moldova at one of the worst times of my life. When things were really bad in Moldova. And me and this guy just started exchanging, voice messages, and we kind of just clicked. And something that I did have a hard time dealing with growing up was actually dealing with the death of my girlfriend. And then every relationship I got into after that became very difficult for me. I never wanted to get attached to another girl again. I never wanted to feel that feeling of love and then loss. And so it affected me all throughout my life. And then while, I was getting to know this guy, his wife was actually 8 months pregnant when we met. I think she was 8 months pregnant, because she died about a month into our friendship, you can say. And she died giving birth. And all of a sudden, I'll never forget getting the message from him, because, we just started becoming close friends, started getting to know each other, helping each other out. and he drops this bomb. I knew he he had a son, and I knew he was having a second child that was due any day now, and the news that I get, the child survived, his child survived, but his wife, and it wasn't just his wife, it was like his best friend. The way that he spoke about his wife, it wasn't some wife, it was not only his partner and wife, but also what seemed more like his best friend. So it was an extremely tragic event that hit me really hard. And as a result of this actually gave us something. Now, this gave us something to I guess, that maybe bond over, to bring us closer together. And yeah, so now in his pursuit, in his attempt to try to make sense of the situation, his child was born. Amazing children. He's really blessed in that regard. He's a great father. Really great man. He's one of the honestly the best guys you could talk to, especially if you're down or whatever, even if you just need to laugh. And I haven't actually been the greatest friend towards him or actually a lot of you recently. I've just been kind of dealing with my own stuff right now, and I'm really sorry about that. Anyways, so years, as time goes on, obviously he's still a young man. He's got, he's alone with 2 kids, and he's looking for a partner. He's looking for a new wife, and he's consulting the scriptures. He's going to God. He's going to the Bible, and he wants to know. Not necessarily for him. He knows he's in the clear. He knows he's in he was dealt a rough hand. He's not angry at God. I mean, obviously he's confused. Obviously he went through that, the waves. But, it's really amazing when an event like this doesn't break a person, and that's really hard. I went through that. I'm sure a lot of us, most people do that. Like I said in the last video, I don't really think that, most atheists are atheists. I think the majority of atheists are just angry little children that are upset that God created the universe this way. And the best way for them to cope is just to, God's not real. There's no God. It's just, no. I'm not saying that all atheists are like that. I think there are some genuine atheists. But I would say that a vast majority of them are just angry, ungrateful little children that don't understand. They think that they could have designed a better universe. And what's also interesting about that is when people complain and yell about God, they're like, why is the world this way? Why is there death in the world? Why this? Why that? Why that? And it's like, well, did you read the end of the story of the Bible? Because the angry God haters will start describing a perfect world, where there's no death and, no darkness and no evil and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, did you read the end of the Bible? Did you read how the story ends? Did you not read that this earth is a temporary, training ground, a world of opposites where without the dark, you don't understand light? You need this dichotomy. You need this rivalry between opposites to understand, and that at the end of the story, that world, that perfect universe that atheists are always trying to describe. Well, if I was God, I would have done this, and why did God create that? It's like, well, yeah, but that's what exists in death, right? That was the promise at the end. And no, I'm not an eternal hell believer. I believe what Paul says in 1 Corinthians, I think chapter 3, that the fire, the lake of fire is eternal, but the sinners are not punished eternally. Fire is actually there to save people, but sinners who reject God in Christ forfeit their heavenly inheritance, whatever it is we are to inherit in the world to come. That all sinners will be saved. Christ came into this world so that none should perish. And so, anyways, that's a whole other topic. But anyways, so what do you do now when you're a widower, or you're getting back into the dating world, okay? And so this is I think a really good topic. Actually, we can talk about quite a few things here. We'll talk about donations at the end. So now let's talk about divorce, because this is rampant. I think right now at this point, marriage is like it's a coin toss. When you get into a relationship with someone, you really have a 50-50 chance that the marriage is going to work out, right? And I think you maybe have a 10% chance that it's actually going to be a happy marriage, right? Like a happy relationship. And relationships are a lot of work. There's no question. And in my opinion, the secret to a good relationship, in so many ways, it's God. It's having God in between the man and the woman. And I remember I said to a girlfriend that I had that that you're I love you the second most in the universe. And she was like, well, who could you love more than me? And I told her, well, I would have to love God more than you, right? Like, God built you, God created you, God put you on this earth, and God gave you to me. Like, I get to have you. And so her response, and she really liked that answer. It made sense to her. It's like when your parents give you, your most favorite toy for Christmas. You open your present, you run downstairs, and there's, the Nintendo that you wanted or whatever. For me, it was a paintball gun. And you're just like, oh man, like, look what I have. It's the greatest thing in the world. Do you love that, that toy, whatever gift you got, more than the parent who sacrificed, their time, their life, their labor to buy you that, to give you that happiness? What is more important to you? How can you love the toy more than the parent who gave it to you, right? And so that was my answer to my girlfriend. It was I can't love you more than God, right? God has to actually come first in this relationship, because I have to recognize that without him, you wouldn't be here. He created you, he built you, and he put you on this earth, and for this time gave you to me. And so that's why God has to come first in the relationship. And when you do that, and that's what, when you understand marriage through the Christian lens, that actually needs to be in my opinion, the core to a successful marriage is having God also as this mediator to keep the marriage healthy and to keep both the man and the woman in check, so that no one's breaking any laws. You're going to stay faithful to your partner, and yeah, so that's how I look at it. If you want to push your odds, okay. But the clauses for divorce in the Bible really are porneia, fornication. So we're going to talk about this, and this includes adultery and the prohibited sexual unions of Leviticus 18. Desertion. So when an unbeliever or one acting as an infidel per 1 Timothy 5:8 physically or functionally departs the common life. So we're going to talk about this because this is kind of interesting. This is actually very interesting how we have to look at it. When your partner deserts you, because they have a specific, there are specific rules when you get married. There are things you now owe your partner, okay? And then there's material neglect. And this is a rather sad one, just because of the state of the world. Yeah, anyways, we'll cover it. All right, so let's start with porneia, fornication. And right away, what you're going to notice is that word pornography, porneia, fornication. Fornication is actually from the word, porn. It's just pronunciation difference over time. The P became an F. Fornication, porn. You could say pornication. That's where it comes from. So these are just things that are outlawed by the Torah, and that is men. You're not allowed to sleep with your mother, your father's wife, whether that's your mother, your stepfather, whatever. Sister or half sister, a granddaughter, an aunt, daughter-in-law, sister-in-law, so your brother's wife. Now there is a kind of like a side rule that if your brother, this is Old Testament Mosaic law, the resurrection of the dead, in a sense that when your brother dies, and his wife dies childless, it is up to you as the next of kin to raise up a child. Now this is a tribal system, okay? To raise up a child for your dead brother. So we learn this, so we can look at the story of Boaz and Ruth in the book of Ruth, and where a bloodline was pretty much wiped out, and in order so that that bloodline, in a sense, the closest blood relative's job was to give the woman a child, and he actually did marry her, take her in. But this is also to do with when you go, for an example, when we go to the Old Testament, we go to the story of Judah and Tamar. And in this story, you have a Canaanite girl, Tamar, and she's married to Judah's eldest son. And that's very important. And the Bible says that his son was very wicked, so God struck him dead. And then Judah marries his next son to Tamar, he doesn't marry her. They don't marry, but his job is to raise up a child for Tamar. So the brother's job is to take his brother's widow and put a child in her. And that's to do with the marriage contract. When she was married to the firstborn, so when the marriage contract was struck for Tamar, in a sense, her child was supposed to be the heir to those people. So instead of breaking that marriage contract, the next born son comes in, so that Tamar, the wife was married to, she was, the heir. Her children were supposed to be the heir. And the second born son, what does he keep doing? He's doing everything he can not to get her pregnant. He keeps sleeping with her, but he keeps doing something so that she's not getting pregnant. And the reason he's not getting her pregnant was because the moment he impregnates her, he loses the inheritance of the tribe. That girl and her son, the moment he impregnates her and puts a son inside her, that woman's son will now be the heir to the tribe, not him. So that's when you read that story of Tamar and Judah and the son that's tricking his father and tricking his sister-in-law and not getting her pregnant, it's because he doesn't want to get her pregnant. He wants to keep the inheritance for himself when it's actually owed to this girl, right? So this is the only rule, that where you can actually sleep with your brother's wife. It has to do with inheritance laws. Okay, but what you're going to notice too is a lot of the, people will read in the Old Testament, Lot. There's a really disgusting story where Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed, and Lot and his two daughters are the only survivors, and God rained fire and hell down and destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah along the Dead Sea. There's a reason why the Dead Sea is dead and why everything's salty. Sodom and Gomorrah was located there. And so when Lot and his daughters run away, the Bible says that now they were just living in Sodom and Gomorrah, where the worst sexual acts were legal. Everything we're about to go through here was the norm in Sodom and Gomorrah, And so the daughters grew up in Sodom, right, and in Gomorrah. They grew up in this region. And so all this sexual degeneracy was totally normal for them. So it's very important not for you to raise your kids in an environment where this stuff isn't normal. And when they ran off with their father, they were the only survivors after God destroyed the city. They truly believed they were the last people on earth. They thought everyone had died. They thought it was the end of the world, like Christians believe, is going to happen today, that Jesus is going to come back and destroy the entire planet. That's not what the book of Revelation says. That's not what Jesus ever said. Anyways, these people actually believe that. And so, you're going to read that story, and what these daughters do, believing they're the last 3 people on the planet, the daughters concluded that it's up to us to repopulate the planet. And knowing their father wouldn't have sex with them, have intercourse with them, they got their father drunk, the girls did, who grew up in Sodom and Gomorrah, grew up in this disgusting place, got their father drunk, and they took turns every night sleeping with him until both of them became pregnant. Now again, the context, they believed they were the only people who survived in the world. They believed it was their job to repopulate the planet. They just grew up in a very degenerate world where that behavior was normal. And just because that story is there in the Bible, like, people will point at that terrible story and go, how can you believe in this? It's like, yeah, but this is condemned. Like, you can't get angry at the Bible for recording our evil history and evil things we've done and evil things we do. And that's actually, to me, a telling, story, like why the Bible rings true to me. It's because it records so many bad things that still happen in the world today. You still have incestuous relationships. You still have, stories where fathers are sleeping with their daughters, or mothers with their sons. Like, that still exists, as crazy as that sounds, in the modern world. And you can't get angry at the Bible just because it's recording a story of a sin that we're still guilty of today. Meanwhile, the Bible outlaws this behavior. Do you know what I mean? So don't let people point at that story of Lot and his daughters and be like, you see, it's not teaching you to do that. The Bible's just telling you that happened, and then here is where the Bible outlaws that behavior. Okay? So anyways, I kind of got off track there a bit. A woman and her daughter. So a man cannot be with, obviously, a woman and her daughter or granddaughter, a wife's sister or rival wife while the first wife is still living. Bestiality, okay, and male same-sex relations. What's interesting about the Torah is it actually doesn't outlaw lesbian relationships. The death penalty only was for men. And I'm not sure why exactly God did it that way. It's not to say that Paul doesn't condemn it later on in Romans, where he just mentions women are doing that. But it isn't outlawed. Lesbian relationships actually don't seem to carry the death penalty in the Torah. It's only for men. All right. Prostituting your daughter, so this was outlawed. Now, prostitution itself was not against the law in ancient Israel in ancient times. What was illegal was prostituting your daughters as a father, and then cult prostitution. And that's to do with idolatry, okay? And so the modern comparison would be porn stars and things like OnlyFans, okay? Where there's a difference between a girl who's out on the streets or whatever, a woman selling her body because she needs to get by, she's in a bad situation, and she knows that this is an option, okay? Versus a porn star like, I don't know, that girl, that Australian English girl, I don't know what she is, that one that's going around, she's really famous right now. And it's now like a cult prostitution. It's like she's famous for this. Men are worshiping her. Men, do you know what I mean? There's a difference between the girl who quietly sells her services on the street versus a girl who's turned herself into some kind of like iconic idol, And we're going to talk about, we're going to be going through the book of Corinthians. And the reason we're going through the book of Corinthians is very historically accurate. The reason Paul is writing to the Corinthians so much about sexual immorality is because Corinth was the Greek capital of sexual degeneracy, you could say. Corinth, and then I would say Athens. But Corinth was particularly bad because of the temple of I think it's Aphrodite, and or Venus in Rome. And here they had, according to the historian / geographer Strabo, the Greek geographer, he recorded that there was over 1,000 male and female temple prostitutes. And again, that's very connected to idolatry, where people would actually go to the temple, and it's more of to do with worship, and I'm sure you had very famous prostitutes by name that men would pay extra for, as long as that they could have these particular girls or these particular men. All right. So now, what do you notice actually when you're looking at this list? Because what's actually happened in the modern world is, and it's a very slippery slope. We've got a pornography problem in the modern world, and it's like you need to show ID if you want to go buy alcohol. You need to show ID if you want to buy cigarettes. You need ID for, anything like over 18, or you have to be 21 to go into a bar, something like that. But when it comes to pornography, you just have to say, hey, are you 18? And you can click yes, Our mobile devices, these things, the idea that little children have this in the palm of their hands, and in the palm of their hands, they are one search away from, I forgot how many it is, how many porno videos are uploaded a week. It's something insane. It's like 100 million a month or something, or maybe it's 100 million a year. I forgot what it is, but guys, it is like one of the number one. It is the number one thing that's being uploaded. It's that. It's pornography and video game stuff. And there is nothing worse, especially for the young man's mind. When I was growing up in the 90s, I think I was like 12 years old when my friend pulled out a VHS tape, those old big black VHS tapes. And we had, and showed us 12-year-olds a porno film. And I mean, it was the most, like, compared to what's out there today on the internet, which is very aligned with what we're seeing on the screen here, the genres of pornography is so disgusting and degenerate, versus like when I was a kid, you'd be lucky to get a cassette tape and your friend would show it to you, and it was really like a guy and a girl, and it was like just normal sex, right? If anything, you can look at it as it was more sex education. It's not like it is today, and we definitely didn't have it in the palm of our hands, where we have 100 million or whatever, 100 million a year porno videos uploaded, and it's just there, and it's like the most disgusting stuff you could imagine. It's not even sex, in my opinion. And men today, especially men, not just men, but women too, like now women are watching pornography. That was like very, very taboo back in my time for women to be watching pornography. Women are generally more, like, men are more visual creatures. Like, men are more into watching pornography. Women are more into reading pornography. It's like, that's why women they all were reading that 50 Shades, or, I think it's 50 Shades of Grey. Women like to read about that stuff. Their brains are stimulated through reading, where men were visual creatures. We need to see, right? But now it's like women are kind of, in it too. But anyways, when you look at the word fornication, porneia, what's outlawed in the Torah, and you were to overlay that with what we could call pornography today, that is at the tips of every young boy and warps their minds. I could not imagine being a 10-year-old boy, 11-year-old boy, and Johnny at school has pulled out his iPhone, and he's showing us bestiality porn at school because it's there, and all he had to do was click, yeah, I'm 18. There was no show me ID. Like, at the very least, like, I would like to outlaw pornography altogether, which I don't think you can do, but at the very least you should get it licensed. And that, people need to present ID, and that stuff should be tracked. Do you know what I mean? And anyone caught watching pornography, having it in their possession without being registered, without having a license, without having a permit, something like this, at least, you cannot just have every porn website is free and any little boy can just click and see this. And I could not imagine what these videos are doing to the minds of young children. Anyways, I digress. Sorry, guys, I go on these little tangents. I just think it's a really important thing, and I think it's an important connection to make that, biblically speaking, this word porneia, fornication, and when we look at what the Bible outlaws and what what we do see in the world of pornography, it's just, there's a connection. Okay? So yeah, when we talk about Corinth, again, it was like a hub it was a main shipping port, yeah. So this was where there was an expression, I forgot what the expression was, but it had to do with sailors. Sailors would literally go out, make all this money being sailors, only to come to Corinth and lose absolutely everything at the prostitution houses, right? At the temples, guys. That's where these girls were working. So it is actually reported there that there is sexual immorality, porneia, fornication, among you, and of a kind that is not tolerated even among pagans. For a man has his father's wife, and you are arrogant. Ought you not rather to mourn? Let him who has done this be removed from among you. So here's Paul pointing out that there's someone in the Christian congregation here that has, father must have just passed away. He should be mourning, but instead the son and the wife, hopefully it's a younger, remarried new woman. He's not marrying his mother, which has happened in ancient history. And so Paul is condemning outright this marriage, and that these people should be put out of the community. That this is not something that we can tolerate. Okay, so and this is now leaning back to the Torah, where a man should not have his father's wife, right? This was also something that was done in the Old Testament in the story of David with his son Absalom. His David's eldest son launched a rebellion against him and chased David out of Jerusalem. And one of the things that Absalom did, his son did, after he had removed his father David from the throne, is he slept with all of his father's concubines, right? Concubines are, mistresses, they're paramours. They're not wives legally, but they still hold, like, in a sense, a position of a wife. All right, so something I wanted to talk about that I forgot to talk about in the last video was in the curses of Moses was, okay, so the Lord will strike you with the boils of Egypt and with tumors and with scabs and itch of which you cannot be healed. So when we're talking about all the signs of how do you know your world is about to be destroyed, God is judging your country, and God is bringing you down, this is actually a very big and important one, and that is itches and things that you cannot be healed from, scabs and tumors and these kind of things. And guys, there's a lot of STDs that there are no cures. Once you have them, you cannot be healed. Okay? And what's happening now is STDs are becoming rampant. And that you can look at an STD like genital herpes. That's a bad one. And it's like 1 in 6 people have it. Okay, 1 in 6 or 1 in 5. And I think it's more common in women. And so that's just, well, that's, I would say, is just because women are much more sexually active right now, to do with, I guess, social media, Tinder, stuff like this. Like, girls can just go out on a Friday night, and girls have a way higher, you know, statistically, they have a much higher rate of, they can have sex whenever they want. Okay, and what's happening is a lot of the women are just chasing a small group of men, and so it's kind of, and so because women are just more sexually active than men, and they just kind of seem to be sharing, more, you know, Chad type men at the top, you can kind of say, that the STDs are hitting women a little bit harder than men. Not all, depends on which one. The rates will, the stats will change depending on which one. But you can look at something like that, and that's pretty crazy when you think that like 1 in 6 people have genital herpes. So STDs, so this is like another big reason why you actually do want to find a wife. You do want to find a husband. You do not want to be part of this sex crowd. You don't want to be out there, slumming and partying and getting drunk and meeting some random person, and your life could be ruined in one night. I've met at least two people in my life, where the one girl literally had sex the first time ever in her life. She was a virgin, slept with a guy, and she contacted genital herpes on her first time. Do you know? I knew another woman who, she was an art teacher, and she got genital herpes, and it was just because, sorry, there's three. There's another one. The art teacher, obviously her husband was cheating on her, and while cheating on her, infected her. There was another one where a woman got together with a man, and they were together for years, and the virus was dormant for years. The guy didn't even know he had it. He never cheated on her, nothing like that. But he eventually transmitted it to his wife after like 8 years or something, and then I forgot how they discovered it, but he actually wasn't cheating on her. It had just laid dormant, and so you could actually be living with some of these diseases. You might have caught it somewhere, and you just, the symptoms lay dormant, hidden inside you. Like chickenpox is a form of herpes. But almost all of us have gotten herpes. Okay, like 99% of the world, or 98, it's something crazy. We all have some kind of form of herpes, right? And so I had chickenpox, and then I had the next one. I had shingles, okay, which is actually really brutal. Shingles was one of the worst experiences of my life. I was actually prescribed heroin to deal with the pain because of where I had it along my chest and going down my back and spine. And it would just rides the nerve system. It's one of the most painful things ever. And I'll never forget giving the prescription to the pharmacist, and he looked at me. He's like, I'm like, what's the problem? He goes, this is heroin. This is it's not even like oxys. It was something much, it was some kind of synthetic heroin that was just on a different level. And like that, shingles and chickenpox are the same thing. It's just step 2. So if you have chickenpox, if you had it, which I'm pretty sure almost all of us did, then you actually have the shingles virus inside you, and it'll either activate or it won't. But we all carry it. If you had chickenpox, you then carry this one too. So I mean, these viruses are really scary. And what I'm going to say is, like, you can have, you might think you have problems, right? But then something medical happens to you, something like you have a medical problem now. And all those problems you thought you had disappear. You might get diagnosed with cancer. And believe me, All those problems you thought you don't have them anymore. You get diagnosed with something like genital herpes. You know what I mean? Something like this. You don't care anymore, And you might think, why? Why is this happening to me? And you might get angry at God too, but these are part of the curses of Moses. Our society is now rampant. I was just reading an article about Houston spring break, and apparently 40 or 50,000 people tested positive for God knows how many STDs, or what kind of STDs, ranging from HIV, genital herpes, whatever. 50,000 people in one spring break tested positive. So guys, you do not want to be, as tempting as it might look, to go out there and be in the slumming world and to go hit up the nightclubs. And you guys, you need to be extra careful in the modern world. Be very careful who you go out with, who you decide to sleep with. Okay, because you can have permanent effect. It can have a permanent effect on you. Okay, what does it say here? Boils, tumors, scabs, itch, and you cannot be healed. And that is rampant in our world right now. It's everywhere. Like I said to you, it's like 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 people are carrying genital herpes. So be very careful. And this is why, believe me, you'd rather stay married and be with one girl than catch these diseases. And if 50,000 people caught diseases just in spring break, do you know, like how many people didn't get tested? How many people were too scared to get tested? How many people just don't care? Maybe they feel like, oh, someone infected me, so I can infect other people. I don't care. Do you know? So guys, you need to be very, very careful out there, and look for a partner. Okay, look for a wife, and believe me, the greatest thing you could do is just stay with that one person. The greatest thing you could do for each other to stay safe, children, whatever. Guys, it's not, you don't want to be out there. Don't be tempted by porneia, okay? Oy vey. All right, so yeah, that's that. Desertion and neglect, okay. So, in one situation, let's draw a situation, okay? And that is, there is someone who is freed from their husband or their wife. So let's say there's a widow, and the widow is a Christian, and the widow is wondering, who can I date? What are the rules about me dating? So say this widow meets someone, and it's this person is also divorced. Now, as a Christian, see, this is a very interesting question. Can you, as a Christian, date a divorced person? And the answer is yes and no. It depends on how they were divorced. It depends on what happened in that relationship, and it depends if they are believers or not. Okay, now there are some arguments. We'll go through it actually just now, right now. So let's just go over 1 Corinthians 7, which we did in the last video, the sex before marriage one. Now, concerning the matters about which you wrote, so the Corinthians wrote to Paul, and now Paul's writing them back. It is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. Okay? That's not what it says. It should say a married woman. It is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a married woman. But because of the temptation of sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife. Okay? And each woman her own husband. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. Okay, so that's very important that no one withholds sex from the other person. That, that's a big reason why you guys are getting married, to, in a sense, relieve each other of that burden. So for what reason? For the wife does not have authority over her own body, and the husband, but the husband. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his body, but the wife does. And that's kind of a beautiful thing. And people might get angry at that. Oh, it's my body, it's my choice. My body, my body, not yours. But when you get married in a Christian sense, you're trading bodies. My body becomes, hers, and her bodies becomes mine. I own her, but she owns me. Do you know what I mean? It's a fair trade. Okay? And so you each become each other's property. And so if your body belongs to your wife, okay, no other man can, or no other woman can touch you. Your body belongs to your wife. This is, it's her body. So you can't go sharing it with other women, and vice versa, okay? And so do not deprive one another except perhaps by agreement for a limited time. So now, does this sound like a guy telling you not to deprive each other and that don't, withhold conjugal right? Did he really say it is good for men not to have sexual relations with a woman? That's insane. Paul did not write that, okay? And we covered this in the other video. Okay, because pagans will attack this. Pagans are going to attack you guys. Pagans aren't going to want to become Christian. People, listen, 90% of men, 95, 90, most men want a woman. We can't live without it. Sex is always on our minds as men. Do you know what I mean? It's just how we're wired. It's biology. It's procreation. It's how children are born. It's how the world keeps going if God didn't make us like that. Okay? So the first commandment in the whole Bible, the first commandment is be fruitful and multiply. The first command God ever utters, to mankind is go and make babies, go have sex. You know what I mean? Our whole world revolves around sex, which is the first commandment God really gives to mankind. Okay? And so don't deprive each other. It's very important that you may devote yourselves in prayer, but then come together again, so that Satan, now guys, this is a great example. It doesn't say Satan. It should say the Satan. That's what it says in Greek. The English translators removed the, put a capital S, so now it's an entity, now it's a person, when Satan is a function. It's not a noun. It's not a person. It can be a person, but it's more like a title. It's more of a, I guess it's a noun. The adversary. It's a thing. But it's not a man. It could be anyone. Okay, so how that should read in English is so that the adversary may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. So what Paul is saying here is you guys need to get married, okay? He's saying it is not good. Now, why is Paul saying, okay, let's look here. Hang on, before I go on my rant. You have heard, so when we read Jesus here, okay, so this is now Jesus talking about adultery. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery in his heart. So if you're going to read that in the English, what Jesus just said was, if you look at a woman, a beautiful woman, which we can't help but do, I'm sorry, we're like dogs, okay? A beautiful woman walks by, it generally takes everything inside of us to not look back. You know what I mean? If a really beautiful woman walks by us, it's like we have to try really, really hard. It's a reflex for us to look back at the beautiful woman. And if we didn't look upon women with lust and desire, sexual desire, there would be no relationships. There would be no, how do you approach why are you approaching that girl? There's something about her, I find her very physically attractive. She's very beautiful. There's something about that girl, maybe it's not her beauty, I'm very attracted to her. I like the way she speaks. I like her mind. She makes me laugh, whatever. The point is, did Jesus really say that if you look at a woman, you commit adultery in your heart? No. In order to commit adultery, that woman has to be married. The woman has to be married. Okay? So that's the only way you can. So what Jesus is saying is he's not saying that Greek word, gune, is a wife. It's a married woman. It's a woman off limits. So what Jesus is actually saying in Greek is that everyone who looks at a married woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery. See, you cannot commit adultery with a single girl, a girl who's not married. Does that make sense? And likewise, when we apply that same logic, that same Greek word, gune, it's everywhere. That's the word Paul's using. He's not using the word parthenos, which is a unmarried girl, a young girl, a virgin. He's using this word. So what Paul's actually saying here, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a married woman. Why? Paul just finished talking to us about it in Corinthians chapter 5. It's the same letter about a guy who took his father's wife. Okay, his father obviously had just died, and now he's taking his father's wife. Okay, great. So that's what Paul's talking about. Okay? Don't be like that guy. It is good for a man not to have sexual relations, not with a woman, but with a married woman. So do not have sexual relations with married women. That's it. Now, that's why it's better for you to go get your own wife. Does that make sense, guys? Do you see what Paul's trying to say when you look at the Greek and you apply basic logic? Christ never said, looking at a woman, a beautiful woman, you commit adultery in your heart. No, what he's saying is, in order to commit adultery, that woman has to be married. That's it. That's what adultery is. So woman, okay, I hope you guys get my point. All right, so it's very important for us that this is, Paul's laying down marriage for us, how to share each other with us, enjoy each other, and that you guys are to be there for each other, to save you from the sexually immoral world, from the porn world, from the fornication world, from that world where you're going to come back with the curses of Moses, the incurable diseases, right? All right, which is happening in our society as we speak. Okay. So later in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 7, now concerning virgins, parthenos, the unmarried, he says, I have no commandment of the Lord, yet I give my judgment. As one that has obtained mercy of the Lord to be faithful, I suppose therefore that it is good for the present distress. I say that it is good for a man so to be. Okay? So, are you bound to a wife? Seek not to be loose. So if you have a wife, don't look for divorce. Don't lose her, okay? Are you single? Then don't seek one. But if you marry, you haven't sinned, okay? And if a virgin marries, if the unmarried marry, okay, the girls who haven't, who single girls marry, she has not sinned. Nevertheless, such shall have trouble in the flesh, but I spare you. But I say, brethren, the time is short, it remains that both they that have wives be as though they had none. Paul is talking about the distress that is coming. He knows that persecution and death is coming. You've been warned by the prophets. You've been warned by Christ. You've been warned by the prophets, by the prophet Daniel. We know bad things are coming. And for the present distress, Paul is saying, don't get married because bad things are coming. But if you have to, it's okay. That's all he's saying. So anyways, don't let people confuse you. That little term there, it is for the present distress. Okay, remember, bad things are coming. Okay. Anyways, they're already being persecuted at this point. Okay, so Paul is going through hell in Corinth right now. Okay, I think this is the whole ordeal with Gallio and the Jews in Thessalonica. The Jews north of him are causing a lot of problems. Okay, so the book of Corinth is very much connected to the books of Thessalonica. Okay, because when Paul was in Corinth, okay, he's writing to the Corinthians now, but when he was there, Paul went through hell when he was there. Okay, writing the books to the Thessalonians. Okay, he was in prison, he was beaten, he went through hell. The Jews were, so they're already being persecuted at this point. All right, so now that we understand that, now we can move to what Paul says about this situation. about can a man or a woman who's looking for a partner, can you marry a divorced person? Okay. And so what Paul says here is, to the married I give this charge, not I, but the Lord. The wife should not separate from her husband, but if she does, she should remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband. And the husband should not divorce his wife. Okay. But now things are going to change a little bit. So Paul is stressing that really for no reason, unless there's a reason for the divorce, fornication, and we're going to get to like sexual neglect, okay? The things kind of outlined by Moses. Unless your partner has done something like this, okay, the church is trying to reconcile you guys. Okay, the best and strongest thing is for you guys to stay together. And I know the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, right? You might think you're in a bad marriage. You really do. You might think your husband's the worst, your wife's the worst. And sometimes maybe you're correct. But oftentimes too is, believe me, once you leave, it's that saying, you don't know what you have until it's gone. All right? And you don't want to destroy a marriage and destroy a family because you read Eat, Pray, Love, and the stupid woman in that book destroyed her marriage, destroyed her family because she was selfish and needed more out of life. That's the number one thing you hear from women. I wasn't happy. And it's like, do you guys know, like, life isn't about happiness? Do you know, like, happiness is part of life. But you're going to be sad. Bad things are always going to happen. Guys, we might be on the brink of war, civil war, the total fall of our empire and world. Do you think any of you women are going to be happy when the country is plunged into a civil war, when communists take over our country? If China and Russia plan some elaborate, 10D, war strategy, take out our power grids, we're all retarded and divided, like we can even fight a war against these people. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you think you're unhappy now? Do you think the people in Gaza are happy? Do you think the Iraqis were happy when we bombed them? Do you think that the Afghanis were happy or the Vietnamese when we invaded them? When they were blowing up their children and stuff and dropping napalm on them? Do you think, I live not far from Belgrade, and do you think that the people here appreciated when the Americans bombed them? I have to deal with that, on a monthly basis as an American guy living here, where I have to be reminded that we bombed this place. We bombed and destroyed and blew up, there's a 3-year-old girl whose face I have to walk by all the time. A girl who died, bombed, guys, women, you think you're unhappy now with your fridge full of food? Yeah? Your marriage isn't good. Your husband's like, there's a little bit lacking. Your husband's not perfect, or husbands, your wives are what? I don't know. I don't know, whatever mini problems that you guys can't seem to work out, your first world problems. Like, guys, things can get so bad, and life isn't about happiness. Okay? There should be greater things. The person who could sacrifice their happiness for their family, for their people, for their country, that is the country that moves forward. That is the country that becomes free, are the people who sacrifice their happiness for a greater cause. The struggle. Do you know what I mean? And it's the countries that refuse the struggle and focus on the happiness. Oh, I just want to be happy. I just want to party. I just want to do my drugs, be on my yacht, play golf, chill, and just play video games my whole life and, forget everything else. It's like that country is destined for destruction. Do you know? So don't let this, I wasn't happy in my relationship. I'm not happy. Yeah. Maybe you have to persevere and move forward. It's not to say you should be miserable, you should be beaten or anything like that. But come on, guys, we have to get real as a people and as a civilization. Like, it's not about our happiness, okay? There's going to be ups and downs, you know. Oy vey. So anyways, so to the rest I say, I, not the Lord, that if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever, so the first part here is really for believers. If you are in Christ as Christians who put God first, God is above everything, and God should be the king of your relationship, just like he should be the king of your household, the king of your everything. You reconcile with your wife. That's it. Okay. Unless your wife was, had broken like a cardinal rule. She's committing adultery. You don't have to forgive her. On those grounds, you can divorce her. Or if your husband was cheating on you or whatever. Or if they were committing an illegal sexual act. Do you know what I mean? You caught your husband in a homosexual relationship or something like that. Or, or like bestiality or something crazy like that. You know what I mean? Yeah, you've got grounds, but a lot of those carried the death penalty. Bestiality carried the death penalty. So, anyways, what I want to mention here is there's rules for believers in Christ, and then when it comes down to here, now it's hard to say what Paul is talking about because we have to look at the historical context of what we're reading. And this is a time where Christianity is just coming out. So you're going to now read Paul talk about the unbeliever married to the believer. What do you do in this situation when one person in the relationship believes but the other one does not? And is Paul condoning Christians to marry non-Christians? And I'm going to say it's a very gray zone. But for the most part, he's not. In the most part, this is a specific time where Christianity is just emerging and pagans are now coming to Christianity, right? So Paul is not saying once you become a Christian, if your partner stays a pagan, divorce them. No. Paul says stay together. Don't let Christianity, don't let your religion, your faith in Christ destroy your marriage. No. Okay, it's not like Islam or Judaism or even the Catholic and Orthodox churches, like not so much. Like you could be a Catholic, you don't have to necessarily marry a Catholic, or same thing in the Orthodox. I mean, they push you to do that. But anyways, so anyways, let's read this. So to the rest I say, I, not the Lord, that if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever, an apostate, okay, and she consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. And if any woman has a husband who is an unbeliever, and he consents to live with her, she should not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband is made holy because of his wife, and the unbelieving wife is made holy because of her husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. But if the unbelieving partner separates, let it be so. Okay? In such cases, the brother or sister is not enslaved. God has called you to peace, for how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband, or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife? So, all right. So very interesting. Now, the problem we're going to run into, or I guess I have to explain that later. When we combine this with 1 Timothy, what Paul says there is, but if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his house, he has denied the faith and is worse than an infidel, than an apostate. So any man who's not fulfilling his job as a man, not taking care of his house, not taking care of his wife, Paul equates him with calls him worse than an unbeliever. Okay? So a man calling himself a Christian who's now not doing his job as a Christian, Paul says are worse than unbelievers. All right. So now, when we understand that, and so let's say a woman is married to a Christian guy, They're a Christian couple. And all of a sudden, the man is now neglecting his wife, not taking care of her, doesn't want to sleep with her, doesn't want to fulfill any of his marital give her her conjugal rights, and he's completely checked out of the relationship. Well, now that man should be approached, sat down by his fellow Christians and say, hey, look, the pastor, the leader of the church should sit down with that man and explain to him, you are in violation here and we need to work on this because it's causing your wife problems. Your wife wants to be with you, or vice versa. Maybe it's the husband, whatever. And then if that doesn't work and counseling doesn't work and talking, coming together and trying to sort and resolve this issue doesn't, nothing is resolved and it continues, that man is not following Christ. That man is not following the laws, the commandments of Paul and Jesus. And so at that point, that man is what he wrote here in Timothy. If any man not provides for his own, and especially for those in his own house, and that would include conjugal rights to his wife, okay, he has denied the faith and is worse than a unbeliever. Now, if a woman, or a man, if you're married to an unbeliever, but I think this is just specifically for this time, the context of the history, we have to look at that, where it wouldn't, how terrible would that be if your wife becomes a Christian, your husband becomes a Christian, you're in the first century, and Paul and Christ command that if you become a Christian, divorce your pagan husband. Paul doesn't say that. No. Paul's like, no. Maybe the wife will, convert the husband. Maybe the husband will convert the wife. Who knows what's going to happen here? But don't divorce. But if your unbelieving partner leaves you, it's okay. They're gone. It's a divorce. It's not a problem when the unbeliever leaves, if that makes sense. So there's different rules when there's believers and when there's unbelievers. But I'm not sure because when we look, so if a man refuses to be a husband, he loses the right to be called a believing spouse. And the law of God sets the neglected woman free from her bondage to the dead covenant, okay? To a dead covenant. Okay, so when the man doesn't follow Christ, might be a Christian, might say he was a Christian, but now all of a sudden he's not following anything, and he's not willing to reconcile and change things, then he's labeled as an unbeliever. He's labeled worse than an unbeliever. And that woman is not a prisoner to that guy, okay? Or vice versa. And so there is divorce in the case of neglect, okay? What did I want to say? So, if a wife is bound to her husband, this is what I was talking about. Because if a wife is bound to her husband as long as he lives, but if the husband dies, she is free to marry to whom she wishes only in the Lord. So Paul is talking about, so I guess what the theme is being set up here is there's different laws applied to when two people are Christians, believers in Christ. And then there's something different when, let's say there's two atheists in the modern world. Let's look at this as an example. Two atheists are married. But now one of the atheists converts to Christianity. Paul does not say to divorce them because they're atheists. Absolutely not. Stay with them. Don't divorce. But if your atheist husband now doesn't want to be part of you, maybe he's right. Maybe you joined one of these culty Christian groups that I wouldn't even call Christian. I've seen this. You join these evangelical Christian, and the brainwashing that just completely changes the spouse, completely changes your partner. I remember when I was younger, it could, not just in marriages, just in relationships in general. Like my older sister converted, became one of those crazy evangelicals, and it caused a lot of problems in my family, and it actually made me hate Christians like 1,000 times more. When I saw the brainwashing that the pastor had done to my sister was a really smart girl, so I couldn't figure it out, And the anger that I had inside me towards Christians, and because like I just hated evangelicals and the whole speaking in tongues and all this crazy stuff. So I could see how like an atheist guy or some maybe agnostic guy, his girlfriend goes full blown evangelical, and he's like, I'm out. I'm checking out of this. But in a sense, like, so understand that two atheists, one comes to Christ. Paul's not saying get divorced. But if your unbelieving husband or wife leaves, it's okay. The unbeliever can leave. But Paul is trying to say stay together. Don't get divorced just because you became a Christian or something like that. But notice what comes later, that if your husband dies, and I imagine this would apply to divorce as well. If you and your atheist partner split up, okay, or whatever, what does Paul say about if your husband dies, if you're loosed from your husband? That she's free to marry, but who? Only in the Lord. So Paul is kind of implying here that round two, if you get divorced or your husband dies, you should only marry a Christian, is I think what Paul's trying to say here. Okay? But if you are already in a relationship, you weren't Christians to begin with. So do you guys see what Paul's saying here? There's rules for believers. There's rules for unbelievers. You shouldn't be seeking a partnership with an unbeliever. Now, is it completely outlawed? Well, the problem is this, is Paul says in 2 Corinthians, when he's rewriting another letter to the Corinthians, because the Corinthians are living in a very degenerate world, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness? And to not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. And you can look at this in a lot of different ways. To be yoked, right? What does that mean? It's like, think of animals. Animals are yoked. They're, you'll have two, you don't want to put a donkey with, an ox and yoke these two animals together, okay? You don't want, you know what I mean? You don't want to be unequally yoked. If one of you is a Christian and the other one's not, the other one's a hardcore pagan. This is like what I realized in the nationalist movement in Quebec is, again, we were divided between atheists, Christians, and pagans. And we were all nationalists. That's great. And when it came to fighting Antifa, great. We were together. We had a common enemy. But the moment we didn't have that enemy anymore, okay, the moment Antifa was kind of out of the picture, we were now infighting like crazy. And I realized, and the pagan guys were total degenerates, I'm sorry. They were drunks, they were violent, they were on mushrooms, they were on steroids, bunch of juice monkeys. Okay, I shouldn't, you know what, if you're on steroids, it's not like the end of the world. But they were definitely like way more, violent, almost every night when we got together, after the meetings, they would start drinking. And then a lot of the times it would end in fighting, And I realized it's like, you know what? I don't want to be associated with these pagan guys in trying to start a national socialist movement. Do you know what I mean? If it's always going to end in violence, these guys are always going to spurg out and now I'm attached to these guys. And I realized how scary that was. That's why I like to be alone. Okay, I don't like to collaborate with too many people or anybody for that matter. Very few people will I associate with, and it's not because it's not that I don't want to. It's it's a scary thing. Because now if I'm working with that person, whatever that person does, I'm kind of attached to it. And to be unequally yoked, the reason why it's scary for us as Christians to work with non-Christians, and that's, I shouldn't say Christians, people calling themselves Christians, but people that don't have a Christian spirit. None of my friends here are Christian. They're traditional Christians. And so you're going to play by certain rules and your partner's not. It's just like I realize you don't want to be unequally yoked with unbelievers. I realize Christians and pagans cannot be part of the same nationalist group. We can't. Because everything that you're going to be building can be destroyed in a moment by someone else's behavior, right? And if you're all waving the same flags, the same banners, and these guys in the group went off and did that, because they're not playing by the same rules you are, right? They're playing by the rules of Odin and Thor and Floki and or Loki, whatever. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's just think of the animals. Even in the Torah, it was outlawed to mix animals. You know, the right animals had to be pulling so that the labor is equal. You know, and well, there's a bunch of different reasons. But anyways, so that's just to say that there's rules for believers and for unbelievers. And so when Paul says, you know, don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers, if we were to take that and apply that to what we just read in 1 Corinthians, it's kind of like, well, are we allowed to date and marry unbelievers? It's not what it sounds like. It sounds like that this is written for the time, that this is written for what happens when a pagan couple, one pagan person comes to Christianity, but their partner didn't. Do you know? That sounds like what's going on in Corinth when Paul's writing this, because when we take all the verses together, so as Christians, can we date unbelievers? I think if the two people were unbelievers, if the couple was an unbelieving couple and one person comes into Christ and the other one doesn't, don't get divorced unless there's a reason. And so, but once you're divorced, like again, it doesn't work out. What's the rule Paul gives the widow? Is you can marry anyone you want as long as they're in Christ, as long as they're Christian. Okay, so if you are a person, you know, for instance, my friend, in his example, his wife passed away very tragically, and as a Christian man, he should only be looking for a Christian woman, because you don't want to be unequally yoked with an unbeliever, someone that doesn't share your values, doesn't share your opinions, that doesn't. Do you understand that where God won't be a mediator in that relationship? Do you know it's the one a really amazing thing about the Bible is when you have a problem and you know you're dealing with a fellow Christian, and and you could put the Bible on the table and open it up and say, okay, well, this is our guide. Like these are the rules here, and which one of us is breaking it? Oh, well, I'm the one. Actually, I'm in violation, and here's where. And now we have to fix that based upon. Do you know what I mean? Versus, I have a rule book that I have to follow, but if I'm dating someone that's a pagan, what are their rules really? You know, that's not to say that someone calling themselves a Christian is automatically more holy than someone calling themselves a pagan. You know, some of the best people I met in my life were atheists, you know. And so, yeah, anyways, I hope that makes sense to you guys. I'm kind of just rambling at this point. I think I made this way longer than I should have been. I've probably been very repetitive. So, yeah. If your spouse passes away, you're now freed to remarry. You need to look at how the person you're marrying, say it's a divorced person, how did she get divorced? Is what what was the cause of the divorce? The cause of divorce in one particular situation was neglect. The husband was neglecting the wife, and the wife got divorced. After they were divorced, the wife discovered that the husband was cheating on her the whole time, hence the neglect. Okay, so here's a Christian man, Christian woman, and all of a sudden the Christian husband was no longer giving her conjugal rights. She was being deprived of love and affection. And then as a result of the neglect, going back to Moses, okay, Actually, we'll talk about that now. Moses writes in Exodus that if a man, okay, takes another wife, okay, to himself, he shall not diminish her food, her clothing, or her marital rights. Okay? And if he does not do these three things for her, she shall go out for nothing without payment of money. And what that means is the husband paid a lot of money for that wife. Okay? If it was a virgin, he paid 50 shekels of silver. If it was a non-virgin, he paid 25 shekels. Okay? Probably. The Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says the Torah only has the numbers for virgins, but according to Jewish traditions, okay, the Talmud does state that in the first century, the tradition back then was non-virgins that got married were half price. Okay, so the point is, when a man marries a woman back in ancient times, you had to pay a lot of money for a bride, okay? 50 shekels is a lot, and we're going to go over what that is. But the point is, Moses outlines that a man has to provide his wife food, clothing, protection, and marital rights, okay? Sex, love, and affection. And that if the man... Now, this is specifically talking about if he takes another wife. So implying that, okay, you have two wives now, but you can't neglect, do you know what I mean? You need to be able to, if you're going to have two wives, you got twice the work to do here, buddy. But just because it says another wife, it doesn't, you have to apply logic here where the second wife who gets these things isn't greater than the first wife who should also have the same arrangement. Do you know what I mean? So, what we have here is Moses commanded that food, okay, physical provisions, clothing, protection and social standing, marital rights, sexual and emotional intimacy. A husband must be providing these things to his wife, but likewise his wife has to be providing sexual and emotional. Like back then, unfortunately for women didn't actually really have too many rights. Okay, it was a very patriarchal system. Okay, so it was not the same world. You can't compare our world right now to the tribal, world of Moses, and then from here, our Christian laws are going to be based upon this stuff. We're going to be able to draw from this. All right, so. So does that make sense to you guys? I hope that's clear. I hope I didn't butcher that completely. And so let's keep going. So sex before marriage, wages and payment. Okay. So let's talk about. We talked about this in the last one, sex before marriage. If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall give the bride price, it's very important, for her and make her his wife. If the father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay he shall pay money equal to the bride price for virgins. All right. And then later in Deuteronomy, so what does that mean? So, actually, let me talk about that first. All right. So, if there is no law that says you have to be married to have sex, and that is not a license to go and have sex and do whatever. I'm saying there is no law, like a law of homosexuality or bestiality. You are not put to death because you and you're teenagers and you both, you're 16, 15-year-olds, whatever, and things happen. A man seduces a young girl. All right. Things happen. I think we're all guilty of it. I'm definitely guilty of that. But what Moses is doing here is he's putting a law to protect the young girl and to protect the father. If a young man sleeps with your daughter and it's found, it's caught, they're caught, you as the father can demand two things. Well, one of two things. You can either tell the young man now he has to marry your daughter, and there's nothing he can do or say. So that would put young men in a very scary situation. You can't just sleep with any girl you want. You might be some smooth talking guy and you seduce this girl and she sleeps with you, but now you guys get caught. And a girl can easily plan this because if there's witnesses or whatever, you are now dragged before the judges and charged. And that girl can say to her dad, and the dad can say, now you have to marry my daughter. And with that comes the virgin price. Now, I made a big mistake actually in the last video. I calculated, I didn't have the right inflation rates. I made a big mistake. I said that the average dowry, the average bride price was between 3 to 8 months of labor. And that would be true if I used first century numbers during the time of Moses. I didn't apply inflation. I realized I made a huge mistake, and this gives me a chance to actually correct it. Guys, the bride price is huge. And if this law existed today, I think a lot of premarital sex would stop. Okay? Would end completely. And the rights a father would have in this situation. Okay, you sleep with, a guy. Okay, let's say I have a daughter and some guy sleeps with my daughter. I find out. And I like the young guy. And the guy likes me and he likes my daughter and I see what's going on. You know what? And I can say to the young man, well, young man, you know what? This is the law. And, I think you'll be good with my daughter. My daughter seems to love you and care about you. And you seem like an okay guy. And this is the law now. And so now that young guy, because I the father, like him, and I'm now going to force him to marry my daughter. And on top of that, that guy has to work for me. Okay? And that's what the 50 shekels is. So later it's described in Deuteronomy, this is expanded upon. If a man meets a virgin who is not betrothed and seizes her and lies with her, and they are found, then the man who lay with her shall give the father of the young woman 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he has violated her, and he may not divorce her all his days. So, now, but also, if the father doesn't like the young man, no, you're not touching my daughter. I don't never want to see you near her again. But you slept with my daughter. Pay up. You have to pay 50 shekels. How much is 50 shekels? It's a big deal. And this is the mistake that I made. If you go back to Sex Before Marriage video, the Sex Before Marriage video, I think at the 50-minute, 41 second mark, I stated that 50 shekels was between 3 to 8 months salary. I compared that to like a dower, like a engagement ring today. That's not correct, guys. I think I in my head I must have applied like first century rates. I mixed two eras together, and it's completely different. I'm gonna correct myself right now. So how much is 50 shekels? Okay. So again, the scenario that was drawn. Now, if we go to Genesis, here's a very good clue. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, "I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." All right. Now, 7 years is actually high. But when you read the story of Laban is a cheap ass. Okay, he's always like nickel and diming Jacob, okay? So guys, if we were to do the math, if we were to take a look at the laws of Eshnunah and then the laws of Hammurabi, the Code of Hammurabi, which is about the time of Abraham, the time of the patriarchs, the time of Jacob and all that stuff. Abraham closer to 2000 BC, and then Joseph and all of them closer to the time of Hammurabi. Hammurabi, they were paid 11 shekels per year. Just under 11. I think it was like 10.8 or something. 10.8. It's okay. You can see how many grains of silver. And then in the laws of Eshnuna, it's 1 shekel per month, but if you hire them for the year, they only get 10 shekels per year. Okay. All right. Or it's maybe a little bit more. There's some additional silver grains. The point is 50 shekels. Now, Moses is a little bit later, so you have to count inflation. And that's something amazing about the Bible, and I'm going to point that out after, is you're going to notice the inflation rates are dead accurate in the Bible. I want you to think about that. People are claiming the Bible's a forgery. Do forgers, when they're creating a fabricated story, do you think they go as far as to accurately write the sums of money and what they were worth for that time? For example, when Joseph was sold into slavery, or we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so anyways, the point I'm trying to draw here, guys, is sex before marriage may not have been illegal, but it carried civil punishments. And guys wouldn't be running around sleeping with girls like crazy if the fathers had the right to say, well, young man, now you have to marry my daughter and you owe me 5 years' salary. 5 years. Jacob had to work 7. Okay, 7 years for his wife. And then 7 for another one. Okay, but if you're making 10 shekels a year, 11, guys, you're spending 5 years of your life buying your wife. And the reason you're doing that is because women back then actually worked a lot. If you ever see like the chore list difference between men and women back then, the man his job might be go work the field, and you're just digging and tilling and growing and being a farmer, or you're out with the sheep, or you're chopping wood, or you're working, as a smith or as a stonemason. Okay. Men generally have one job, and then within that job there might be things to do. But women, when you look at the chore list of a woman, from women would have to kill the chickens, pluck the chickens, bring them in, grind the wheat into flour, make the yeast, get the fire going. They'd be making clothing. The women's list of chores versus the man's. I'm not saying men worked, really, really hard, but it's kind of like women are multitaskers naturally, and men are very one-minded. We can only really do one thing at a time. For the most part, there's always exceptions, but the man will be out doing his one thing, his one trade, what he's good at, hunting or fishing or whatever. And then the woman, when she's at home, she's doing a lot of things, from making clothing, fixing clothing, washing clothing, preparing the food, keeping the fire going, keeping the house warm, cleaning the house. It's insane how much work a woman had to do. Not even that long ago, back in even pioneer days, back when, we were colonizing America. Anyways, so the reason you're paying the father this price is because when you have your wife, he's losing that worker in the household. You're gaining that worker in the household, right? You now have this amazing worker, your wife, that's now responsible for doing all these little things while you're out. Okay, so in a sense, you're compensating the father who's losing a family member, who's losing a worker and a helper, someone that helped build his household. And that's actually also what you're compensating him for. Because now you're going to gain all that woman is now going to bring into your life and into your household as she leaves her father's house and is joined to yours. Does that make sense? All right, so yeah, between 5 to 7 years, the average man would have to pay for his wife. So imagine that's today. Imagine you as a father, you have that right. Do you know what I mean? And you as a young man, if that's the punishment, if, you know what I mean? Oh, I just slept with her. I just slept with Sally because she was easy. Well, did you like Sally? Well, no, I didn't. I don't really like Sally. I just slept with her because I could. Well, guess what, Johnny? Now you have to marry Sally. You're bound by law, by civil laws, by the laws of Moses, and that father's now coming. And if he doesn't want you to marry, you're going to have to work 5. You're going to have to pay for that virginity, and you don't even get the wife. Do you understand? You don't even get her. So it's kind of like, I don't know, 5 years of your life, or you better come from a rich family, you know what I mean? Anyways, so, and then even once the girl lost her virginity, I don't know if it's true. All I can do is quote the Talmud. And the Talmud, look, the Talmud is not, obviously I'm very anti-Talmudic, but there are things in the Talmud, like a Sabbath day's journey, when the New Testament says, and it was a Sabbath day's journey, only the Talmud can tell us what that means, because it's a Talmudic law, it's a Talmudic rule that doesn't exist in the Torah. And so I have to consult the Talmud to know what the hell the New Testament's talking about. How far is a Sabbath day's journey? Because it's not something Moses wrote, it's something, so sometimes I do have to look to the Talmud for context of history to know what's going on, if that makes sense. So the Talmud will tell us that in the first century, it was a common practice that a woman who wasn't a virgin, there was still a 25 shekel. I mean, obviously you have to count inflation. The Jews counted inflation, so I forgot what it is. Anyways, I forgot exactly what it was. But inflation was calculated, okay? And here's an example of inflation. And look at how amazing the Bible is here. Now imagine guys forging the Bible in like 2nd century, 3rd century BC, Hellenistic Egypt. And they're fabricating the Bible. Oh, guys, we gotta... And they actually nailed all the inflation prices. And they're like, yeah. And they sold Joseph. Joseph was sold for 20 shekels. Yeah. Do you know why Joseph was sold for 20 shekels? If you go to the codes of Hammurabi, that's how much a slave was worth back then. And that's bang on. So when they're selling Joseph for 20 pieces of silver, for 20 shekels, that's exactly how much a slave cost at that time. So the guys who wrote Genesis, boom, nailed a detail that only someone living at that time could have known. Do you understand? And guess what happens when we come to Moses? Well, now there's more silver in the world. Silver's not as rare as it was, during the time of the patriarchs. And so the price for a slave now is a little bit more. You need more silver now. It's 30 shekels by the time you get to Mosaic law. Perfectly recorded. And guess what you can compare that to? You can compare that to the Hittite laws. Just north of, they're the ones who also recorded 30 pieces of silver at that time. So it's not just the Bible. Hammurabi says, yeah, it was 20 shekels for a slave. Then you come to Moses' time, and yeah, guess what? Not only Moses wrote 30 shekels, but the guys north of them, we have records of them. Perfect inflation, guys. Okay? And then when we come to King Menachem, king of Israel, it's now gone up to 50 shekels. And guess what? The Assyrian records, because this guy's dealing with the Assyrians. He has to pay the Assyrians off, and he's paying them off at 50 shekels. Because we now have Assyrian records where it was exactly 50 shekels now for a slave, for a man, to hire a mercenary, whatever. So, and that's hundreds of years. By the time you get to Menachem, you're 1,000 years, more than 1,000 years away from Abraham. Do you know? And so the prices have changed. And all throughout the scriptures, what you're going to notice is whoever wrote the Bible, right? Because these guys in Hellenistic Egypt were writing this forgery, and they just nailed the inflation prices, all backed by secular historians, by secular records, right? And you have to remember that the Greeks did not have the Assyrian records. The Greeks didn't even know the Hittites existed. The Bible's writing about Hittites. Who are the Hittites? Herodotus thought the Hittites were Egyptians. He didn't even know the Hittites existed. And the Bible's perfectly recording the Hittite kingdom. The Christian world was mocked for over 1,000 years because we talked about the Hittite kingdom. didn't exist. No Greek ever wrote about them. No one wrote about the Hittites. The Bible did, and now we dug up their whole civilization. Thousands, tens of thousands of their tablets, laws, codes, everything that also mention the 30 shekels. We dug up Nineveh. We were laughed at. Where's Nineveh? There's no such thing as Nineveh. We dug it up and found the greatest and biggest ancient library where we now know it was 50 shekels to buy a person. So you always have to think about the inflation, not just for the slaves, but also when you're considering the wives, the women, and stuff like that. All right, and yeah, when you get to the 1st century now, it's 50 shekels or plus, depending on the type of slave that you're buying. All right. Oh yeah, and this is just the difference between a dowry. When you're reading the King James Bible, so here's the ESV and the King James Bible. The King James Bible is a very poorly translated Bible. It's really sad. And this word here, that he shall pay the mohar according to the dowry of the virgins. A dowry is what a man, the father of the bride, pays the groom. Okay, it's what the woman brings with her when she moves in. It's not the bride. It should be translated. The ESV, the English Standard, has a way better translation where it's actually the bride price, the price for the bride. Okay, that's the mohar, and that is the 50 shekels. Okay, that's the 5-year salary that that shall be paid to the father of the bride. But then when that's all done, the dowry is the opposite. The dowry is opposite. Okay, so the mohar is paid to the bride's father for the daughter. The groom pays it. Okay, that's what it is. But you'll notice in the King James Bible, it's translated as dowry. That's a King James Bible translation, dowry. Okay, but it's price for a wife. A dowry is paid to the groom for the wife. It's something that the family, it's a gift. It's much smaller than the mohar. Much, much smaller. Okay, it's whatever the father, now maybe in most cases, I mean, there are some cases where a dowry is offered. Hey, if you marry my daughter, I'll give you all this stuff. I'll give you these castles. It's a big dowry, right? So fathers, rich fathers can actually persuade a man with a huge dowry, if you marry my daughter. So that's the difference between a mohar and a dowry, is the mohar goes from groom to the wife's family, and the dowry goes from the bride's family to... So the King James butchered that. They wrote the dowry of the virgin. No, it's the mohar. It's not a dowry. The dowry goes in the opposite direction. All right, that's what a dowry is. A dowry is money, goods, or property that a woman brings to her husband or his family upon marriage. Okay, it's not the same as a mohar. It's not the same as the bride tax. Okay, so let's finish this up. I'm really sorry, guys. I make all these videos so long. I'm trying to make them shorter. Okay, so now in a corrupt court system, we're talking about Christian stupidity. Okay, as the world's falling apart, corrupt judges, corrupt courts. We're going to look at some Old Testament passages, look at some New Testament stuff, and it's about divorce. If you guys are planning on getting divorced for whatever reason, I just want to go over some stuff, okay? So Isaiah writes, your princes are rebels and companions of thieves, so our nobility, the guys who rule over us, our senators, our politicians, our nobles, the guys running our universities. Your princes are rebels and companions of thieves. Everyone loves a bribe and runs after gifts. They do not bring justice to the fatherless, and the widow's cause does not come to them. So the law is paralyzed, and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. Its heads give judgment for a bribe, okay, like our nobles, our leaders, our judges. Its priests teach for a price. Its prophets practice divination for money. Yet they lean on the Lord and say, is not the Lord in the midst of us? No disaster shall come upon us. No, disaster is coming upon us. You can look out. Just look out your window. Woe to those who decree iniquitous decrees, and the writers who keep writing oppression, to turn aside the needy from justice, and to rob the poor of my people. And to rob the poor of my people of their right, that widows may be their spoil, and that they may make the fatherless their prey. And this one is interesting. This is a good one. Later in the same chapter in Isaiah, woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger, the staff in their hand is my fury. The staff of Assyria is my fury. Against a godless nation I send him, and against the people of my wrath I command him to take spoil and seize plunder, and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. Guys, think about how scary that is. That is God, who had just blessed Israel, made them the most powerful people in the world, the envy of the world, and now God is raising up Assyria. He's raising up an army specifically to destroy the people because of how evil and degenerate and wicked they are. And if you're not looking at China and Russia and everything going on right now, and how China is like, if people cannot see that God is building up China, and China hasn't even fired a shot. China has taken over the world, and they haven't gone to war with anybody other than a couple skirmishes with India. Do you know what I mean? And China and India are both in this BRICS thing together. So, I mean, if Russia can actually keep these two in check, I mean, guys, what China has done in the last 50 years is mind-blowing since the 70s, like mind-blowing. They've total Sun Tzu victory, where we've been fighting war after war after war, bankrupting ourselves, destroying our reputation, destroying our country. China's just been sitting back, taking over the world economically, capitalizing on our stupidity. It's mind-blowing. And I just think of this idea that, now China can outproduce us in virtually everything. We're dependent on them for everything. And they own all our patents and all this stuff. And even if we went to war with them, it would take us a year, to whip our youth into shape, get our factories running. Do you know what I mean? China can outproduce us like they can build warships and planes. And anyways, I just look at God right now, China as Assyria. God is raising up this nation to wipe us out. Anyways. In the New Testament, so the point I'm trying to draw here is corruption is everywhere. The courts are a total nightmare. Corruption, murder rates, solve rates, criminals just walk. The Epstein files, 9/11 is just a total, it's unbelievable that no one got arrested for 9/11. Our princes are just totally corrupt. Our nobles are out of control. Justice is for sale. And as Christians, the point I'm trying to draw here is this. Listen to Jesus here. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going to him to court, lest your accuser hands you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. All right. When one of you has a grievance against another, does he dare to go to law before the unrighteous instead of the saints? So you as a Christian, if you've got a problem with someone, you should not be going to court, to the actual courts. Guys, we should be solving our problems ourselves. Why would we go to the unrighteous, to the unholy courts where we know is a business? We know these people are corrupt. We know these lawyers just serve mammon. They just serve money. They do not have our best interest. Why would we go to these people? Okay. And get them to judge over our affairs? Why do people, when you're getting divorced, say you're getting divorced, okay, I get it, you're upset, you're angry, it's an emotional thing. Why can't you people sit down together as adults, work out the problem? Because now what's going to happen is the courts and the lawyers are going to take half of what you and your husband, you and your wife own. They're going to be robbing your children because you couldn't Do you know what I mean? I saw people dump hundreds of thousands of dollars, like $250,000. They bankrupted themselves. They went away with peanuts. They had a big home. They had money. They had cars. They had everything. And they were getting divorced, and they couldn't solve the problem out themselves. They couldn't just say, okay, well, this isn't working, and we need to be adults here, because if we don't sort the problem out ourselves, we're stealing from our children. We're robbing our children of their inheritance and giving it to these vipers who run our courts and legal system. The law societies are evil. The courts are evil. I'm sorry. These people are soulless, heartless pieces of shit. Pardon my French. Sorry, when it comes to like the court system, I get really emotional. So why do we go to them? And Christ is saying, argue with your brother while he's dragging you to court. Try to resolve it before you get to the judge. Try to work out your problems yourselves. Don't go to the system. Don't go to the unrighteous instead of the saints, instead of those who are called, those are Christians. Or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world is to be judged by you, and you are incompetent to try trivial cases, like, if that's what Paul and Christ is trying to say to us, like, don't you know that in the end, in death, we are to judge the world? That is part of the perks of being a Christian when you die. And if you can't solve small issues, who are you to judge the world? Okay, who are you to judge people? Do you not know that you shall judge angels? Now, angel does not mean man with wings, supernatural, hypergalactic guy. It could be messenger, it could be pastors, it could be envoys. That word angel is not what we think it means. It's a transliterated word that was never translated properly into English. All right. So how much more then matters pertaining to this life? So if you have such cases, why do you lay them before those who have no standing in the church? I say this to your shame. Can it be that there is no one among you wise enough to settle a dispute between the brothers? But brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers. To have lawsuits at all with one another is already a defeat for you. Why not rather suffer wrong? Why not rather be defrauded? But you yourselves wrong and defraud even your own brothers. Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, no adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality, thieves, the greedy, the drunkards, the revilers, the swindlers, none of them will inherit the kingdom of God. And such were some of you, but you were washed, you were sanctified, you were justified in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ and the Spirit of God. All right, so now I'm just kind of tying that last part, sexual immorality, all that stuff, and we're all sinners there. No one here is not a sinner. We're all guilty of this stuff. Okay. But my point is, Paul is trying to smash our heads together. And it's like, why? Paul knows during his time the courts were corrupt. That's why Jesus was so angry. Our time today and the time of Christ are very similar times, So anyways, as Christians, we need to learn to solve our problems ourselves. And that was actually something that drew the Romans and drew the pagans to Christianity. Was the Christians minded their own business. They settled their own affairs. They didn't, you know what I mean? We should not be going to the courts. We should not be suing each other. We should be staying away from the courts at all costs, and we should be solving our problems amongst ourselves. Okay, it's part of being a Christian. All right, so I just wanted to end, I think, on that. I think we're going to end there. Okay, so don't go to the courts and suffer yourselves to be defrauded. We need to be very mature, especially in these times, and have compassion and patience for each other and understanding. And I know, guys, it can be very emotionally charged. You might absolutely want to kill your spouse. You might want to kill your brother. And you just got to be calm. You got to be calm, and you got to find a way to resolve the issues, because it's like we talked about in the last video with friction. A prosperous nation prosperous people shouldn't be bogged down by the courts. Your word should be your bond. When a man says, yes, I will do this, you better be able to do it. And if you can't, you better be able to pay for the damages you caused by saying you could do something that you couldn't, that you didn't fulfill. Okay, so we have to return to this people where we don't need a law system. We don't need contracts. Your word should be your bond. Okay, we need to be honorable men who put God first. Put God first. That all of our interactions is when you're interacting with your wife, God is that filter. Okay, the Spirit of God should be that filter between us and whoever we're dealing with. Whether you're dealing with your brother, whether you're dealing with your neighbor, whether you're dealing with your friend, whether you're dealing with an animal. Okay, what you're dealing with, whatever. God needs to be in between you and that person. You and that creature. Okay? And so that when you're dealing with your wife and you're dealing with her through God, because she's a child of God. She belongs to God. Even whether it's an animal on the street or whatever, a dog on the street, that animal belongs to God. Okay? So that's it. And so what I would say, to reiterate again with a certain situation, that if you do get divorced or if you find yourself loosed from your spouse, and you want to remarry, and you're a Christian, then you're to seek a Christian woman. If that Christian or a Christian partner, if that Christian partner was also divorced, it is important that you understand why they were divorced. Okay, there needs to be a reason. Otherwise, that woman should be reconciled with her husband, or that those people need to be reconciled. Okay, guys, the worst thing you could do is divide a family, break up a family, especially if you have kids. Always work towards reconciling. But obviously, if it's something like very, very bad, something you just can't get over, maybe your wife cheated on you, maybe you discovered one of your children aren't yours, like something huge that's just, it would take a very special person to forgive such a thing, which, depending on the situation, I guess. If it's something that can't be reconciled, then at least get divorced in a calm fashion. Stay away from the courts. Learn to do it yourselves. Save yourselves the headache, and don't feed these vipers, these leeches, these parasites. What's the word I'm looking for? Ticks, these that just gorge every drop of blood, every dollar out of you, and they're just robbing from your children's inheritance. Learn to solve your problems on your own. And yeah, and that's it. I really hope, man, I hope this was an okay video. I hope you guys learned something. And yeah, I'm going to start with the question and answer videos right away. So anyways, guys, I think we're going to end there. I think that's the end. Yes, that is the end. Okay. So that's marriage and divorce. And yeah, donations are here. Give, Send, Go is here. Do at least write down or bookmark the Odysee, Instagram, Twitter, and Telegram in case I can get axed at any time on YouTube. If you guys want to support me, which I am fully dependent on you guys, there's a Give, Send, Go link in the description. Okay, and every little bit counts. Thank you guys so much for all the support that I've gotten. I'm going to try my best to thank you all properly, all of you guys who have been supporting me and keeping me going. So hopefully I can do that once the book is out. And anyways, so that's it, guys. All right, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys are well.